Police slammed a black teenager to the ground, then froze when they found out who his father was. Malik Carter walked with the kind of ease that only came from knowing who you were. 17 years old, tall for his age, shoulders wide from years of basketball and push-ups in his bedroom, he moved through the world with quiet confidence, not cocky, not loud, just steady. Raised by a single father who wore a badge and expected excellence, Malik had learned early how to carry himself with intention. Today was like most days, a hoodie over his head, earbuds in low, and his gym bag slung over his shoulder as he made his way home from a workout. The air was crisp, the streets were clean. The kind of neighborhood with porch cameras, lawn signs that said, "We believe in kindness," and residents who still locked their doors even while sitting inside. It was a good neighborhood, safe, supposedly. Malik liked coming here. It made him feel like maybe he belonged in places people didn't always expect to see him. As he crossed Oak Ridge Avenue, a police cruiser slowed at the intersection. 2 officers inside, the one in the driver's seat wore sunglasses and a tight mouth. The other rested his arm out the window, eyes scanning, not with curiosity, but suspicion. Malik noticed. He always noticed. His dad taught him that. "Your eyes keep you alive," he used to say. "Your ears tell you what your eyes miss." Malik took one earbud out and kept walking, pace even, posture neutral. "Don't run, don't reach, don't give them a reason." The cruiser crept forward, then stopped beside him. "Hey!" one of them called out, already stepping out of the vehicle. Malik turned slightly, keeping his hands visible. "Where you headed?" "Just walking home from the gym," he said, polite. "I live about 4 blocks that way." "You live around here?" the second officer asked, stepping out on the passenger side now. Malik nodded. "Yes, sir." "You got ID?" He shifted his bag. "No, sir. I left my wallet in my gym bag at the rec center." The second cop narrowed his eyes. "So you're out here, no ID, hoodie up, right after we get a call about a break-in 2 blocks over?" Malik shook his head. "I just finished practice. I can call my—" "Turn around, hands behind your back." The words landed like a slap. Malik blinked. "Sir, I didn't—" "Now," the officer snapped, already moving in. He grabbed Malik's arm and twisted it behind his back. Malik didn't resist, but the grip tightened anyway. The other officer shoved him forward, and Malik hit the grass hard, a knee pressing into his back. His cheek scraped against the dirt. His mouth tasted blood. "I didn't do anything," he said into the ground. "Stop resisting!" "I'm not," his voice cracked as the cuffs clicked tight. He was yanked up by the shoulder, hoodie choking his neck. His wrists burned. The world spun a little, then snapped back into place. Across the street, a man walking a dog slowed but didn't stop. A woman jogging looked over and turned her head. But a teenage girl paused, phone raised, recording. The officer searched his bag, water bottle, basketball shorts, protein bar wrapper, no ID. Nothing on him. "Let's take him in, he fits the profile." Malik glanced up. "What profile?" he asked, quietly. "Black kid in a hoodie?" They didn't answer. The door of the cruiser opened and Malik ducked in, careful not to bang his head. The cuffs forced his shoulders back at an unnatural angle. The metal cage in front of him was scratched with names, numbers, something that looked like a dried tear. He sat still, breathing through his nose, thinking. He remembered being 12, sitting on the back steps when his dad gave him the real talk, not the one about girls, the one about the world. Marcus Carter didn't sugarcoat. "You don't get to be scared," he'd said. "You don't get to raise your voice. You don't get to look angry. You keep your hands visible. You answer clearly, and you make it home." At the time, Malik thought maybe he was exaggerating. Maybe his father was just being overly cautious. But now, cuffed in the back of a police cruiser with blood drying on his lip, he understood every word. As the car pulled off, one of the officers looked at him through the mirror. "Got any priors?" Malik said nothing. "You hear me?" Still nothing. He wasn't going to perform for them. He wasn't going to explain himself. He didn't owe them that. And besides, what could he say that would change the story already written on their faces? That he was 17 with a 3.7 GPA, that he'd never even had detention, that his father wore the same badge they did, but with twice the integrity. None of that mattered in this moment. Not in that car, not with his wrists behind his back and a cut on his lip. All they saw was a suspect. They didn't know who he was. And Malik didn't tell them. Because part of him needed to know, what would they do when the badge wasn't there? When his father's name wasn't a shield, what would they see when they looked at him with no title, no context, no protection? Now he had the answer. They saw exactly what they wanted to see. The ride to the station was short, but every second dragged. Malik kept his eyes on the back of the officers' heads, memorizing the stitching on the seat, the dust on the edge of the partition. He didn't ask where they were taking him. He didn't ask what they thought he'd done. He just sat in silence, because silence was safer than anything else. At the precinct, the booking process felt routine for them. For Malik, it felt like something was being peeled off him, his name, his sense of safety, his place in the world. They took his bag, his shoes, his phone. They asked him to confirm his name. He did. Malik Marcus Carter. But when they asked for an address, he hesitated. Not because he didn't know it, but because he was starting to wonder what it mattered. They hadn't listened before. Why would they start now? "You got someone we should call?" one of them asked, without looking up. Malik didn't answer. The officer glanced at him, annoyed. "You want to play that game? Fine." They took his fingerprints, put him in a holding room. The walls were dull grey, the bench cold and narrow. Malik sat, wrists still cuffed in front of him, jaw clenched. His lip throbbed. The taste of blood lingered. But he didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't plead. He just waited. Across the city, Marcus Carter was hunched over a case file, halfway through solving a double homicide with no witnesses and too many suspects. He was sharp like that, knew how to find the lie inside the noise. But something pulled at him. A silence that wasn't right. He checked his phone. No messages from Malik. That wasn't normal. They weren't the type to talk all day, but they always checked in. Just a quick, "You good?" or a "Home safe?" He called, no answer. Texted, nothing. He tried again, straight to voicemail. His mind started moving faster than his body. He called the gym. Malik had left an hour ago. Called his ex-wife. She hadn't heard from him either. She kept her voice even, but Marcus could hear the shift. A mother knows, a father feels it too, just in a different place. Lower, deeper, like something tightening around the spine. At the precinct, a young officer named Torres was reviewing intake reports. He wasn't a detective, not yet, but he was smart, still green enough to care and sharp enough to notice patterns. One name on the intake sheet caught his eye, Malik Carter. Something about it rang familiar. He pulled up the file. Male, black, 17, no priors, brought in for suspicious behavior. No property recovered, no evidence, no official charges filed yet. He clicked deeper, scanned the contact information. Emergency contact, Marcus Carter, badge number 2109. Torres stared at the screen, then stood up. In the back office, one of the arresting officers leaned against a desk, joking with his partner. Kid thought he was slick. Got real quiet when we brought him in. Probably some rich kid trying to play street. The other laughed. Bet his parents are going to throw a fit when they find out. Torres stepped in, paper in hand. "Hey! That kid you brought in, Malik Carter?" "Yeah, what about him?" Torres held up the report. "His emergency contact is Detective Marcus Carter." The laughter stopped. "Wait, Carter? As in Carter? Torres nodded. Yeah, that's his son. There was a long silence, the kind that makes you feel time differently. The joking stopped, the arrogance cracked. The officer who'd slammed Malik outside clenched his jaw but didn't say anything. He just stared at the wall like it might open up and swallow him. Back in holding, Malik sat perfectly still as the door opened. A different officer now, nervous, voice softer. "You're free to go." Malik looked up. "Am I charged with something?" "Number, there's been a misunderstanding."
He stood slowly. His wrists were raw from the cuffs. No apology came. The hallway outside the holding cell felt too bright, too quiet. Then the room shifted. Marcus Carter walked through the door.
He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. He moved like a man who knew exactly where he was going and who he was going to find. His coat was still buttoned. His face was still calm. But the fury behind his eyes was unmistakable. He saw Malik. Stopped. His son's lip was split, one cheek red, turning purple, hands bruised, and still, Malik stood straight, chin up. Marcus's voice was low, steady, and dangerous. "Uncuff him." The officer holding the keys froze. "I said uncuff him, now!" They fumbled with the lock. Malik rubbed his wrists once he was free. The two men stood facing each other for a second that felt like an hour. Marcus didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He saw it. He knew. He turned to the officer who brought Malik in. "You want to tell me why my son was booked without a single charge? Why he's bleeding in a holding cell while you're out here cracking jokes?"
The officer stammered something about matching a vague description. Marcus cut him off. "Don't insult me. You didn't arrest a suspect. You profiled a teenager." Nobody spoke. Marcus turned back to Malik. "Let's go."
They walked out together, side by side, through the same doors Malik had entered in cuffs. The same officers watched them go, the weight of what they didn't know pressing down harder than ever. They hadn't just arrested the wrong kid, they'd arrested the son of the man they all knew, all respected, all worked beside. And still, none of that stopped them from seeing him as a threat. It didn't matter whose blood ran through Malik's veins. Not until the system realized it belonged to one of their own. The station never offered an apology, no formal statement, no acknowledgement of harm, just a brief line in a report that read, "Released without charge." But that didn't stop the story. The girl's video hit social media like a match on dry leaves. It opened with Malik's face in the grass and ended with his silence in cuffs, captioned, "They slammed him like he was nothing. He's a cop's son." The views stacked by the thousands, then the hundreds of thousands, then millions. Not because it was the first time something like this happened, but because this time it hit closer to home. This time it broke the illusion that being part of the system could protect you from it. The department scrambled. They called it a miscommunication, a regrettable incident. They suspended the officer who put Malik on the ground with pay, pending an investigation. Behind closed doors, some asked Marcus Carter to help contain the fallout. "Speak to the press," they said. "Let them know we're handling it." But Marcus wasn't interested in damage control. He wasn't interested in smoothing over the cracks. He was interested in the truth, and so when the press conference came, he stood behind the podium with the cameras flashing and microphones leaning in. He didn't come in uniform, just a black sweater. His voice was even, measured, but every word landed like a stone. He told the world that his son was detained without cause, profiled based on race, injured in the process. He didn't hide the facts. He didn't spare feelings. He simply said, "My son is 17. He has no record." He was respectful, calm, and clear. And none of that mattered. They didn't see a kid. They didn't see my son. They saw a threat. And that tells me everything I need to know. The room went quiet. Even the reporters who usually interrupted with questions didn't move. Marcus continued, "I've worn this badge for over 20 years. I've served this city, protected it, and bled for it. But what happened to my son reminded me that this badge doesn't make me immune. It doesn't protect my family. It doesn't shield us from what the world has already decided we are.
He paused then, let the silence work. You shouldn't have to be somebody's son to matter. But for too many of us, that's the only way we're allowed to be seen. The clip went viral, it played on the news, got clipped into 1,000 TikToks, posted with captions like, "This is how you speak truth to power." But Marcus wasn't looking for attention, he wasn't trying to go viral, he just wanted them to stop pretending the problem was invisible.
In the days that followed, the city murmured. Some were outraged, some tried to defend the officers. Others asked the usual questions. What was he wearing? What did he say? Why didn't he have ID? But most just watched the video and realized what they already knew, that sometimes doing everything right still isn't enough when your skin gets read as danger. Malik kept mostly to himself. He went back to school, walked the same path home, same hoodie, same gym bag, but something in him had shifted. He didn't walk any faster. He didn't flinch when he passed a police car. He just carried it differently now, like a weight that was no longer hidden. The school invited him to speak at a student forum on race and justice. At first, he didn't want to go. He wasn't looking to be a symbol, but eventually he said yes. He stood in the auditorium in front of rows of classmates and teachers, a microphone shaking slightly in his hand, and said, "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be profiled. I didn't ask to go viral. But maybe if it happened to me, someone with a father on the force, maybe it'll finally make people see what happens to the ones who don't have that." He paused, glanced down, then continued. "I shouldn't have to be the son of someone important to be treated like I matter. And the next time this happens, and it will happen again, just remember that the only reason anyone cared is because my last name rang a bell. That's not justice, that's branding."
The room was quiet. Even the principal looked like he'd swallowed something heavy.
That night, Marcus came home and sat at the kitchen table with a folder in front of him. He'd typed up his early retirement paperwork. He didn't tell Malik why, but he didn't have to. He was tired of playing both sides, tired of giving his best to a system that almost swallowed his son. Weeks later, a local mentorship program asked if Malik would come speak to a group of younger boys. Kids who looked like him, who walked the same lines every day, never sure who saw them as students or suspects. Malik didn't have a speech that time. He just sat with them, told them what happened, told them the truth. Not the kind you hear in courtrooms, but the kind that makes your throat tighten. The kind that gets passed down from father to son, brother to brother, friend to friend. And one afternoon, months after everything had settled, Malik walked home again. Same route, same hoodie, same sky. A police cruiser passed by, slowed for a second, then kept going. It didn't stop, didn't ask questions, didn't slam him down, just kept moving.
And Malik did too.
Because in the end, he didn't want special treatment. He didn't want people to back off because of who his father was. He wanted to be seen clearly, fully, without fear, without projection, without having to earn humanity through bloodlines and proximity to power, because no one should have to be somebody's son to matter. The ride home from the station was silent. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had already been said through bruises, silence, and the sound of handcuffs closing. Marcus drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead, jaw tight. Malik sat in the passenger seat, watching the trees roll by. The city hadn't changed, but something between them had. Not love, not trust, but a layer of protection that both of them used to believe in. And now, neither of them did. When they pulled into the driveway, Marcus turned off the engine, but didn't move. Malik stayed quiet too. It was Marcus who finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell them who you were?" His voice was even, almost tired. Malik didn't answer at first. He looked out the window, then down at his scraped hands. "I wanted to see what it felt like," he said softly. "To just be me. No name, No badge behind me, just me. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. Not because he was angry, but because he understood more than he wanted to admit. He opened the door and stepped out. Malik followed. Inside, the air felt heavier. Malik sat at the kitchen table while his father stood across from him. The light above them buzzed faintly. "You know," Marcus said, leaning on the counter, "I've spent my whole career believing that if I worked hard enough, kept my head down, stayed professional, that it would mean something, that it would shield you, that the badge was enough." He shook his head. "But it doesn't protect us, not really. Not you, not me. They saw you as a threat before you even opened your mouth." Malik looked up. "You think I don't know that?" His voice didn't rise, but there was something raw underneath it. "I've known that since I was 12 and you gave me that speech on the back steps. I know how to move, how to speak, how to survive, and I still ended up in cuffs. You think I'm surprised? I'm not. I'm just tired." Marcus sat down across from him. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The silence between father and son wasn't empty. It was full of everything they wished didn't have to be spoken. Finally, Marcus said, "You shouldn't have had to go through that. Not to prove a point, not to understand what I already knew."
"And you shouldn't have had to walk into a precinct and see your son like that," Malik replied. "But here we are."
The video of Malik's arrest had already started spreading. The girl who filmed it had uploaded it with a caption that read, "He didn't yell. He didn't resist. He just got slammed." People watched. People reacted. And when they found out who he was, the son of a decorated detective, it hit differently. This wasn't just another story to scroll past. It was a rupture in the system's own house. The illusion of fairness cracked wide open. The next day, Malik's face was on every screen. News anchors debated it. Radio shows discussed it. The precinct went quiet. Officers avoided eye contact. Some were angry the video got out. Others were quiet in their guilt. But everyone knew what was coming. A press conference was scheduled. The department wanted to control the narrative. They drafted a statement calling it a procedural misstep and asked Marcus to stand beside the chief when it was read. He declined. Instead, he stood behind a separate podium. No uniform, no badge. Just his voice and a truth that had been waiting for its moment. The room was full. Reporters, cameras, flashes. Malik watched from the back, arms crossed, face still healing. Marcus spoke clearly with no performance in his tone. "My son was stopped, thrown to the ground, and cuffed like a criminal. Not because he posed a threat. Not because he matched a detailed description, but because he was walking home, wearing a hoodie and black." He paused, letting the words settle. He told them his name. They didn't care. He cooperated. They didn't notice. And it wasn't until they saw my name on his record that they realized who he was. That should terrify you. He didn't blame a single officer. He didn't use names. He spoke about the system, about the normalization of fear, about how the people trained to assess risk too often confuse skin tone with danger. "I have served this city for 20 years, he said. "I have led investigations, mentored young officers, buried friends who wore the same badge I do. But none of that mattered when it came to my son. Because the system I've served still looked at him and saw someone to be subdued, not protected, not questioned, subdued." A reporter raised a hand asking if Marcus planned to take legal action. He ignored the question. "This isn't about lawsuits," he said. "This is about reflection, about whether we are willing to admit that our instincts are not always innocent, that our training has gaps, that the people we serve are scared of us, and sometimes with good reason." He closed with this: "You shouldn't have to be the son of a detective to walk home safely. You shouldn't need a name that matters to be treated like you do." The footage of his speech made national news. Commentators praised it. Critics dissected it. Some officers bristled, but for most people, it wasn't about policy anymore. It was about what it meant that even the son of a respected cop wasn't safe from the assumptions that come with his skin. Malik didn't go online. He didn't read the comments. He just sat on the porch that night, hoodie pulled over his head, listening to the wind. His dad sat beside him, quiet. And in that stillness, they both knew something had shifted. The world hadn't changed, not yet. But the mirror had been held up, and the image in it was too clear to ignore. The badge was still sitting on the kitchen table. Marcus hadn't touched it since the press conference. It just lay there, quiet, like it finally understood its weight. Malik passed it every morning on his way out, never asking if his father planned to pick it back up. He didn't have to. Some things don't need to be said out loud. The house was quieter these days. Not because something was wrong, but because something had changed. They moved slower, they listened more, like survivors after a storm, not frantic, just taking stock of what was left. The precinct had offered Marcus a leave of absence, a promotion, even a public commendation if he'd just helped them calm the narrative. He declined all of it. He didn't raise his voice, he just told them the truth. You don't get to injure my son and then ask me to fix the story. He never raised the issue again. He didn't have to. Malik went back to school the following week. Same halls, same eyes. Some students whispered, others nodded, like they saw him differently now. But Malik didn't walk like a martyr. He didn't play the victim, he just kept moving forward, one foot after the other. What had happened to him wasn't new. It had happened to others, it would happen again. But now, at least for a moment, people were paying attention. The school's Black Student Union invited him to speak at their monthly forum. Malik said no the first 3 times. He didn't want to perform pain. He didn't want to become someone's proof. But after a while, he said yes. Not for the cameras, not for the clicks, for the kids who looked like him, quiet, watchful, always carrying the weight of being mistaken for something dangerous. He stood at the front of the school auditorium, palms sweaty, heart steady. No script, no suit. Just a 17-year-old boy in a grey hoodie with a busted knuckle and a story that had been dragged out of him. He looked around the room, took a breath, and said, I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be a headline. I didn't ask to be slammed on the ground, but I didn't resist. I didn't curse. I didn't run. And it still happened. The room was still. Some students nodded. Others dropped their gaze. When they found out I was the son of a cop, everything changed. Suddenly I was human. Suddenly I mattered, but what if I wasn't? He let the question sit. What if I didn't have a last name that meant something? Would anyone have listened? Would anyone have cared? Someone in the back sniffled. A teacher wiped her eye. Malik didn't flinch. I shouldn't have to be somebody's son to matter. None of us should. You shouldn't have to wear the right last name or live on the right street to be treated like you belong.
The applause didn't come right away. It wasn't that kind of speech. It didn't end with hope, it ended with truth. And that sometimes was harder to clap for, but when it came, it was honest, full, heavy with respect.
Later that night, Marcus watched the recording on a laptop at the kitchen table. He didn't smile. He just closed the screen, walked into the hallway, and finally picked up the badge. He held it for a long time, then slid open a drawer and set it inside. The next day, he filed his retirement papers. He didn't throw a press conference. He didn't announce it online. He just left, quietly. The way he'd served, the way he'd raised his son. He didn't stop being a protector. He just shifted where he gave his strength. 2 months passed. Malik was invited to a community mentorship program for black boys across the city. He didn't give another speech. He just sat in a circle with them, listened, answered questions, told the truth. You have to be smart, he said. But not just book smart, survival smart, emotional smart. Learn how to breathe through things, learn how to stay alive. And if something ever happens to you, don't think it's your fault. Don't think silence is the only way. He didn't try to be a hero, he just showed up. And one day, when he was walking home, hoodie up, bag over his shoulder, he saw a cruiser again. It slowed, just like before. He looked at it, kept walking. The cruiser kept going. No lights, no voices, no slamming. Just air. Just silence. And Malik didn't smile. He didn't breathe a sigh of relief. He just kept walking, because that's all he wanted. Not to be feared, not to be famous, just to be free enough to move through his own neighborhood without being questioned for existing.
Because he wasn't his father's badge, he wasn't his last name, he wasn't a threat.
He was just a young black man trying to get home, and that should have been enough.